Come on, come on, come on. There's half. I've taken just the weight off. Now watch those knees. Come on, watch those knees.
2, 1.
Push, 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 push. Right, deep breaths, deep breaths. 3 deep breaths, okay? What's up guys, in this brand new series, we're going to be breaking down each of the body parts and giving you the best practical advice you can implement into your training right now. In this episode, we're going to be diving into quads and specifically how to execute the split squat and all its variations, as well as the leg press, and how to make sure you're not wasting your time so you can feel, look, and perform your best with the best possible results. As ever, be sure to hit subscribe so you can stay up to date with this information. And without further ado, let's dive in.
Okay, so split squat, I think everyone's favorite. So main reason we're doing a split squat is going to be very similar to, say, a squat or a hack squat or a leg press. It's going to be like that lower body pushing movement. So predominantly we're going to be working quads, so front of the thigh, and then glutes. Again, a bit like the ideal, we're going to be working adductors a little bit as well, which is that inside of the thigh. So when we're getting set up, we start with feet about shoulder width apart. And then Akash is just going to take one big step forward. So as he gets into this big step, I would say when you are doing it, especially first time or trying to find that big stance, take a larger stance than a longer step than you probably think is like normal. That front foot we want to be flat on the floor, and then back foot you're going to be up on the ball of your foot. Now you can use split squats for a variety of different things. The way we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be trying to get everything we can out of this front leg. We're going to call that like the working leg, and this back leg is just going to be there for balance. So I want you to think when you're Akash in this stance, for this set, everything is on his left leg, and that back leg is just to stop him from falling over. Because if you took it off the floor, you'd be so unstable, you wouldn't really be able to do any proper work. From there, we want to make sure that 3 points of contact, so the ball of your foot, little toe, and heel just stay in contact with the floor the whole time. From there, he's going to sink down as low as he can go. I'm just going to pause there. So now we get to see how strong he is in that bottom position. So in terms of depth, we want to go as deep as you can without any movement from your spine. Now, for most people, that's not going to be a limiting factor because the floor is going to kind of cut that range of motion before we go too deep. But we want to go as low as you can to the floor to either just touch it very lightly, so just like your kneecap just kisses the floor, or you can just stop like half an inch short. So I've got kind of like hairy knees, so I find as soon as I feel like the hair on my knee touches it, I'm coming straight back up. I find if you go and try and do something, I think I've got maybe hairier knees than your average trainer. But if you go with that kind of intent as well, that eccentric or that lowering portion is going to be really controlled, because if you drop too fast, then your knee's just going to hit it. So I'd say if you either think of just like knee hair touching it or your leggings just touching it, but think about that so it's really light. The last thing we want is to start bouncing off the floor on there. Now, if you're using a Smith machine, you're going to be stuck going straight up and down. But what is great about body weight or dumbbells or potentially like a kettlebells or however you else want to load it, is you can also start to sink forward as well. So if Akash, as he comes down, he also sinks forward. You'll see here, his knees being able to travel forward here as well. So this is going to change which muscles are working the most, and then kind of basically what you're going to be getting out of it more. The more Akash's knee can travel forwards, the more we're going to be able to close up this knee. That means the more his quads are going to be working on there. So if we want to replicate a squat, and if it's there as like a lower body pushing movement, we're going to normally want it to be more quad biased or quad dominant. So sinking forward and getting as much quad in there is probably going to be in line with that anyway. As you push your knee forward, there is going to be a point at which your heel will start to come off the floor if you do it excessively. So do you want to just like do one? So his quads are going to be under kind of more stress or have more demand on them there, but the stability is going to reduce because his heel's not on the floor anymore. So although there can be time and a place and everything, as a general thing, I would recommend is keeping that heel on the floor. It's probably going to keep you stronger. And if you do have any knee niggles or anything, it's probably just going to play on the safe side of that a bit more as well. In terms of torso angle, we're going to, for now, just think about staying up as straight as you can. You can start playing around with it by adjusting your torso slightly further forwards. Just go, even just rest at the bottom if you want to. So if you wanted to make it more glute dominant, so you're working your bum more, It's still a hinge, so we're not rounding it back, but he's just going to lean forward slightly more. And that's basically just going to mean that this left glute is just going to be working a bit more on there. The main thing though, whatever angle, torso angle you decide to go with, is it stays consistent. What you don't want to do is start coming down and then leaning forwards, and it almost turns into people trying to do like a good morning at the bottom. So it's like they hips shoot up and then they're standing up, and we're just, a bit like with the RDL, as we said, we're bending our knees, we're just shooting which part's working the most here and there, just trying to get from A to B. So if you're going to go, I think for now, I'd say majority, let's just stick with trying to stay upright. Whatever torso angle you go with, just try and keep that consistent across the set. In terms of common mistakes, I think we already touched on back knee kind of bouncing on the floor, but I think the most common is going to be just not going deep enough. And that's basically just because the deeper you go, the harder it is. Okay, so we get weaker, it's just going to be more challenging position. The deeper you go though, the more your quads and your glutes are going to stretch, and the more stretch they are, is the more kind of potential we've got to give a really good like muscle building stimulus for them. So if you are and you're doing like these small ones at the top, not only are you probably looking a bit silly, but you're also really cutting your potential for actual getting results on there as well. Another real common one is going to be that knee falling in as well. So as you come down to the bottom, just do like your knee falling in. It can be quite easy to kind of relax, or if you're not thinking about it, that knee starts falling in towards your midline. So what we want to do is keep your knee in line with your midfoot. So you can think about like a second toe, or if you've got shoes on, you can go with your shoelaces. But as long as that's staying in line there, you're going to be stronger and potentially avoid some kind of niggles on there as well, potentially as well. I think as long as foot's staying flat, you're controlling that eccentric or lowering portion, you're going as deep as you can, you're keeping your knee in line with your foot, you've probably avoided 99% of the mistakes we see with split squats.
Some of the thing with the shoes applies to this as well, I think. Yeah. So if you've got like excessively cushioned shoes, it can make that whole 3 points of contact difficult. So sometimes I was a bit wobbly on that, but I prefer taking my shoes off. The other thing that will help with balance, because balance seems to be the issue until you get to the point where it doesn't become an issue, is finding one point on the wall to fix your gaze on and just locking into that. And at the same time also making sure you're applying that same rule of 360 degrees of pressure. Because if you do that, again, you're going to be more stable and you'll be able to lift heavier weights. And one more thing is use straps so grip is a limiting factor. Otherwise, you end up finding your forearms are hurting more than anything else. And one more thing, if you can go from one leg to the other without any rest, that means you're not going heavy enough. I personally take 2 to 3 minutes in between legs. Yeah, because if I was to go from one leg to the other, I'd be able to do like 1 rep. Because yes, it is a single leg exercise, but at the same time, there is an element of like the other one is doing some work. But more than anything, it's just the amount of systemic and nervous like overload that one set is. You shouldn't be able to go straight from one to the other. At least like I'd say a minute.
Yeah, well, whatever your rest period on pro is, just do that between each leg is what I'd recommend.
Yeah, that's a big one. Any questions?
I never know how, your knee went in front of your toe.
Yeah.
I never know what is the right amount. Because I try to keep my leg vertical. I kind of just go down.
Yeah.
But what is kind of the right and wrong?
So it depends what you want. If you're just going straight down, so basically whatever joints are moving, the muscles around there are going to be working. So I'll do it here just so everyone can maybe see. But if I go straight down here, I'm getting a lot of movement at my hip, but there's not that as much going on at the knee. So my glutes are going to be working a lot more and my quads aren't going to be working as much. If I stay really, really upright and just drive forward like that, there's going to be a lot more movement now happening at my knee. So quads are now going to be working a lot more. In terms of where your knee can finish, in terms of like feeling safe, it's going to be totally individual. But it's basically what your knee can tolerate. It's not like a right or wrong. If you've had a really bad knee injury, might just, and you're rehabbing or whatever, can't handle much stress, then potentially it's better to try and keep that shin a bit more vertical. But that's something that you can then progress over time and see how far your knee can come forwards on there. But yeah, we'll make it a bit more quad dominant. But I'd also say though, if when you walk upstairs, your knee's probably going in front of your toes, or if you go downstairs. So it's not like a big no-no basically on that.
Any other questions?
Using steps at the gym, some kind of scene.
Yeah. So they're all variations of the same thing. So you've got front foot elevated split squat, Bulgarian split squat with your back leg up, they're all just variations. The same principles will apply across the board. If your front leg's elevated, you should be able to go deeper on that front leg. We'll walk you through the basic technique, Ed, if you want to take a seat. So you want to go about shoulder width. The main thing you want to remember to start this off is to make sure that your pelvis is fully against the pad. Okay, so as you're going up and down, you want to make sure that you're not rounding your back. That's where most of the issues happen. And in fact, in 2012, when I tore my annulars in my L3 and 4 in the lower back, it was because I was doing leg presses, and every single rep, the back was coming off, and I was essentially just crunching the discs in very layman's terms. So that's where it can go wrong, and the reason why it happens is if you go too deep, basically. So you only want to go as low as you can whilst keeping your back and your pelvis locked in. So yeah, let's go for it. So unlock it. Each leg press will be different in how you unrack it, but generally speaking, there'll be some levers that you use. And then you want to lower it under control, as low as you can whilst keeping your lower back in contact with the pad, and then push up. Generally speaking, you want to take 2-3 seconds on the way down, make sure it's controlled, get full range of motion, for whatever that may be for you, and then press up. What you don't want to be doing is the classic half reps. That's probably the worst mistake we see. Or just rushing it too much, where you're just dropping it down and then pushing it up. Yeah, probably not as excessive, but yeah. Those are the biggest common mistakes: is speed, depth, or lack of range of motion, and then the big one is really the butt coming off the pad and the pelvis coming back. If you can avoid that mistake, then you're going to be a good place to push your legs hard. Okay. Any mistakes you'd add to that?
Maybe like hands on her.
Yeah. To add stability, to help keep your lower back and pelvis in contact with the pad, just grip your hands as hard as you can on the handles. Okay, they're there for a reason, so use them to create more stability. Any questions? Minesh? Yeah, I'd say it's a bit of personal preference there. I think there's no harm in having it back and no harm in having it a little bit forward. Again, there's ways you can manipulate the leg press to target different areas. I think for the most part though, just focusing on like a shoulder width stance, spreading the load through your feet and just going for it, yeah. Any other questions? Feet? Yeah, so when you're at the bottom, I'd say if it's like, it's a good way to demonstrate this.
I'd say you want them to hit your quads, you want them as low as possible without your heels coming off at the bottom. So for me, this bottom position, as deep as I can go, my feet are flat. But if I was to come a bit lower, if I was to get that same range, my heels are going to have to come off the pad. And I think that may be another common mistake is you will be stronger if you come up really high. You're actually you'll train your hips a bit more, but you're not going to get that much movement at your knee. So your quads aren't going to be doing too much. So if you want to hit your quads, go as low as you can, keeping that foot flat in that bottom position. It's always better to have more depth and more movement at your knee than potentially less weight on there.
That's probably where the ego thing comes into the leg press. It's probably the most ego-driven exercise there is, in that people want to load up the plates and they sacrifice on their depth. Okay? And that's probably one we missed with regards to the heel coming off the pad as another mistake. Yeah, you don't want to fully lock out, keep it slightly bent. Just keep tension on the muscle all the times. Yeah. There's no set pause duration. I'd say control it in 3 seconds on the way down. So 1, 2, 3. You can do a slight pause if you want to, but it's not a necessity. What you want to avoid is any sort of bouncing. Okay? Even if you think you're pausing at the bottom, you're probably not pausing, but what it'll do is it'll kill the sort of momentum that you might otherwise be doing, where you kind of just bounce out the bottom. Yeah, so it can be a useful sort of cue in your head.
1 second at the bottom of a leg press is like a day in real life. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I personally breathe in hard at the top, and then I just probably hold and then exhale on the way out.
You want at that bottom position when your knees are by you want all that air still in you, and then you'll probably have lost it.
You probably use that as like a belt at the bottom, like same sort of thing. You're gonna be super tight at the bottom because if you're loose on this, it can be risky.
I think something that we were chatting about with one of the other groups, actually, probably good for everyone to hear, is if you go on one leg press and you go into another one, they're going to be potentially completely different. So if you're using, I think examples like 300 kilos on, it was your chow, wasn't it? You're saying you're up to about 300 on your one in your own gym. If you come to a different leg press, that equivalent difficulty might be 500 kilos or it might be 100 kilos. They're completely different machines. If you go on leg press here, there's another leg press right there. It's going to be completely different. So I would just say when you do approach, if you're on holiday or in a new gym or whatever, just start like a clean slate. Don't try and, I'll just put that on, that's what I normally do, because potentially you're just going to get stuck with your knees by your ears or something.
If you enjoyed today's video, make sure you hit subscribe, share it with a friend. If you want to take the next step in your transformation journey, book a call with our enrollment coach by clicking the link in the description below. Can't wait to hear from you and seeing your transformation go to the next level.